Hello, TikTok. Um, I'm not an influencer. I don't do this very often. I am a software engineer. I like to think that I'm a pretty logical thinking person. Um, I'm extremely good at pattern recognition. A student of history. I like to read a lot, um, and was not largely political until the last few years. And so this post will be pretty political. Um, I want to address, I think, the level of danger that we've kind of approached, given the current strangeness of our administration. I use the term strangeness, in the most I don't know a more polite way to put that, I guess. But there's always signs throughout history that a democracy ultimately will likely collapse. Um, and so I've been monitoring this situation pretty heavily for my own family, for my friends, to say at some point, there's always a tipping point. There's always a moment where before you don't think you need to leave, or you don't think you need to get out, or you don't think it's too bad. And then there's a moment, and then afterwards you can't leave. It's that time has passed. And it's very difficult to see that moment. If we look back to Germany, for instance, everything was fine. And then in a very, very quick moment, it wasn't fine. And I say fine, it wasn't really fine. Things were getting really, really bad, but they were happening in a way that desensitized you to it, so that by the time the borders were shut and you couldn't leave, that that didn't seem like it was the next logical step. Um, and so I think we need to look at what the Trump administration is doing currently through the lens of reality and pragmatism, and say we can recognize that they're they're doing a blitzkrieg on our constitutional and foundations, the checks and balances that we have in our government, and they're doing it in a way that's deliberately pushing the boundary of everything they're doing. Right, so Doge in the Treasury, that's not legal. Stopping payments to different organizations, that's not legal. The administration, the executive branch, is legally obligated to use the funds that Congress appropriates in the way that Congress appropriates them. And we're noticing that Congress is just laying down and taking it. A series of lawsuits have been filed, on a variety of these things. Again, Doge, pretty much everything that they're doing, the buyout for federal employees. I'm sure that we'll see lawsuits about the stopping funding to like NIH, stopping funding to pretty much any medical organization. But those are the things that we look for throughout history. What does an administration do when it is trying to topple a democracy? Some of the really, really clear warning signs to me were the purging of medical records and data, specifically purging words that pertain to transgender, assigned a specific biology at birth, or assigned a specific gender at birth, identifies as one or the other. We don't notice it because transgender people are such a small portion of the population. Don't get me wrong, Democrats have been loud about this, right? These people deserve rights. But for the majority of us, it doesn't touch us personally because there's so few transgender people that we don't. It's an easy segment of the population to crush because it will affect so few people. Meaningful resistance will not mount. This is exactly what the Germans did. They picked really, really marginalized communities to go after because they wouldn't have enough meaningful resistance. And then they just kind of upped the ante and they picked bigger populations and bigger populations. And it's not just the Germans, right? Mao did something similar. Even Putin in Russia has done something similar. And so we have a lot of examples of this kind of stuff happening. It's designed currently to be this shock and awe scheme. Do 5 or 6 things every day. And Steve Bannon said this years ago. He said this was their plan. Do several things a day so that by the time you're trying to deal with the last thing, you are incapable of dealing with the first thing because so many new things are happening. And then the next day they do it again. They do 3 or 4 or 5 things that are just absolutely bonkers, insane. Pull us out of the WHO, pull us out of the Paris Climate Accords, fire a bunch of inspectors generals. I got a list here in front of me. Replace a bunch of high-ranking military leadership, which in and of itself isn't crazy. A lot of new administrations do that, but they don't do it and specifically state we're vetting loyalists to the administration, not to the Constitution. That is a weird thing to do, to cancel medical funding in the country and to say we're not going to do that anymore, and to tell the CDC that we can't cooperate, with other nations on viruses, or we have this bird flu thing going on. We're not even talking about it. Tuberculosis is breaking out. We're not talking about it. We have a cabinet that is full of just completely incompetent, wacky weirdos that just don't make sense in the positions that they're going into. And that's by design. It's designed to shock you and throw you off and make it to where you can't focus on solving an issue because there's so many new issues popping up. And so what the Trump administration is doing fundamentally is saying, I can break the law in a variety of ways and no one is going to stop me. And as they set that precedent more and more and more, they can break laws that would ordinarily result in a significantly larger pushback. Human rights violations are already starting to happen with the ICE situation. Donald Trump claiming that he wants to send Americans, or Marco Rubio making a deal with El Salvador saying we're going to send American citizens to prisons in El Salvador. That is a direct violation of the Eighth Amendment. I mean, how are we going to monitor that Americans aren't subjected to cruel and unusual punishment in prisons that have historically subjected their people to cruel and unusual punishment, right? It's a direct violation of your constitutional rights. A lot of these ICE stops are direct Fourth Amendment rights violations. They're not asking, they don't have a warrant. They're not stopping you with any legal justification. They're just stopping you saying, show me your papers. And if you don't have them, that's it. You're going, dude. And which is very, very, it sounds right like we're back in Germany, but it hasn't gotten bad enough yet that people have said, I need to leave, or it's going to happen, it's going to collapse. For me, that moment was specifically the purging of medical records. Once administrations start trying to change history, it was a combination of that and defunding public news outlets, directly trying to control the narrative now, directly purging medical records to try and make it seem historically like something isn't the way that it is. Those for me were the tipping point. And so I told my family, we're going to leave. I don't think it makes sense to stay in the United States anymore. And I would tell all of you to deeply have that conversation with yourself internally. I don't know how to fight this because it won't get to a point where enough people will galvanize to fight it. And it was the same thing in Germany. The same thing happened. It just never got bad enough that by the time it was so bad, there was no fighting it. As soon as you spoke up, you were just shot in the street. And I would love to say that law enforcement will stand up, or the military will stand up, or somebody will stand up internally and fight this. But again, historically, that just doesn't happen. And to think that as Americans we're above that is insane. 50 million people voted for 70-something million people voted for this. 77, I think. That's a crazy number. Crazy. A lot of people support this. Military recruitment numbers shot up after Donald Trump got elected. People want to fight for this. They want this to happen. And I think it's time to stop lying to ourselves about that and to just own it and to just say this is where we are in history. History will not look kindly on us. It won't. We will be the bad guys. And I hate that. I hate that I'll have to explain to my children that their grandparents were not good people. And that said, I would rather be able to explain that to my children than to stay here and possibly not be able to. So I love all of you deeply, my whole heart. If there's anything I can do to help anybody, feel free to reach out. Let me know. I don't know that I'll make a bunch of videos on this, but I wanted to make one, at least to put my opinion out there and to say, if you think that there will come a time where it will make sense, there won't. It'll just be too late. Make the decision. Just choose. If you can leave, do it. If you can't, find a blue state, a deeply blue state, Washington, Oregon, California, somewhere with a coalition bloc that they can resist in some meaningful way. And there's no guarantee they'll be able to, but that would be my recommendation. I love you guys. Good luck.